Okay, awesome. We are live on Facebook. So we are going to get started. It is 8 o'clock here in Minnesota. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. My name is Tracy Dwight, and I'm the Community Engagement Manager at Dow Labs. We are so excited to be a part of this community of women committed to building each other up through education. It's been a privilege to collaborate with Kris Gonzalez to bring you this free webinar where we'll be exploring the components that make up a healthy cycle. So just a couple of quick housekeeping notes before we get started. The presentation will be about 30 minutes. Feel free to use the chat or Q&A functions of the Zoom meeting and the comment section in Facebook if you want to ask a question. We'll save all of the questions until the end of the presentation, and then I'll help moderate the Q&A. I want to introduce you to my colleague, Kris Gonzalez. Kris is a licensed acupuncturist, board-certified herbalist, and guide into the lost art of radical self-care called Nourishing Life. Her passion for empowering women in aligning with their intuitive nature comes to life in an inner alchemy practice she calls menstrual attunement, harmonizing your cycles. With a master's degree in science, she incorporates her Western medical training to help her patients find the root cause to their health concerns. She also has specialty training in women's health, pain management, and therapeutic application of essential oils. She's the resident acupuncturist for Seamitrick, the largest supplier of vaginal steam products in the US, and is a faculty member of Wise Womb Medicine Path Living School for the Temple and Healing Arts. In addition to this exhausting resume, which I'm tired reading, Kris is a wellness ambassador for Dow Labs, and we are thrilled to collaborate with her and so thankful that she's willing to share her expertise in women's health with us today. So with that, I will give you the floor, Kris.
Hi, everybody. So as Tracy said, go ahead and ask questions throughout the course, and she's going to be the most amazing moderator and collect all those questions so that we can address them at the very end. So be sure to write those questions down and say hi, chat. Okay, so let me actually X this out of my screen because I know I'm sharing my screen right now. Okay. So I just wanted to thank you guys at Dow Labs for this amazing opportunity for collaboration and just starting to have conversations about menstrual cycles and periods and kind of make it part of normal culture to talk about. So I wanted to kind of start off by just talking about why it's so important to have these conversations. So first off, there are way too many women that are suffering in silence needlessly. And as a practitioner, seeing so many women patients, you get to see this in real life. When they come into the clinic, they explain to you their experience with their menstrual cycles, and they adopt it as like it's normal. It's totally normal to feel these intense symptoms and have reproductive issues associated with their health, anything from PCOS, endometriosis, fibroids. It's like almost like it's not even a question that those things are not happening in their life. So for women, we have distinct female organs, distinct from that of a man. And so with this, it brings unique issues and challenges. And I think that's not really recognized enough here in the West. I think the way that we approach health as women, as modern women, is very much within the context of what's healthy as a man. In Chinese medicine, there's really rich history about recognizing that women have these really dynamic inner workings happening within us. They recognize that and then treat accordingly. They don't treat a woman the same way that they would treat a man. They take into account the very unique and distinct female parts. So another reason why it's so important to talk about menstrual cycles is because it's like a vital sign. So just like if you were to take your temperature, if you were to take your blood pressure, your heart rate, those things are vital signs. And for women, this is another vital sign. So it is a barometer of sorts. It's like a tool that we have to ourselves that has like this inner insight. We have this insight into our inner well-being and our health, the state of our health. So that's why it's really important to talk about. Culturally, I don't really feel like we've had proper education, and so that's why I'm really excited to collaborate with Dow Labs to bring this educational piece to women, so that when you're searching for some type of relief for your discomforts, that you can find an answer. Yeah. So let's go ahead and start with the slideshow. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. Okay, so let's get started. So let's start very basically. Let's start, and what's a menstrual cycle? So it's a natural physiological process that occurs in the female body that makes pregnancy possible. Regular menstrual periods between menarche, with menarche meaning the first time you actually had your period, to menopause are a sign that your body is in harmony. So I really want to kind of focus on the natural physiological process within this slide, because I want to point out that other natural physiological processes are your digestive system, your respiratory system, you have your circulatory system, a lot of other systems. And when they're functioning in a natural, harmonious way, you are absent of symptoms. So your body is made for survival, and it has these mechanisms that ring to you or give you signals that something is a little out of harmony. And so the menstrual cycle is exactly the same. It's a natural process, and when something is out of harmony, your body will speak to you. It will let you know that something is out of harmony. So the reason I wanted to kind of hone in on that part is because I feel like we've adopted this mindset that menstrual cycles are supposed to be painful, and they're supposed to be kind of the bane of your existence, basically. And we haven't really harnessed its true potential in a tool for us as women to really gauge and proactively approach our health. So I wanted to add a quote from Time magazine. It says, according to some forms of ancient Chinese medicine, a woman's menstrual discharge, meaning her blood, is interwoven with her qi, or life force. If her qi is disrupted by stress or disease or internal discord, which is kind of an emotional etiology or beginning, those issues may manifest as irregularities in her menstrual bleeding. So here I just wanted to point out that Chinese medicine has a really rich history in gynecology and in women's health in particular. And they had this knowledge that menstrual blood is so tied to your overall well-being, your life force. So I just wanted to run some quick figures. These are astounding, you guys. These are really mind-blowing when you think of, as a culture of women, that there's so many of us that are suffering. And so just to read off the slides, according to American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, nearly 85, that's more than half of us, experience at least one common symptom associated with PMS during their reproductive years. And 5% actually have this really intense form of PMS called PMDD. And it's really severe. It's debilitating, actually. So 70 to 80%, this is crazy, this number right here. So 70 to 80% of American women over 50 will develop fibroids, actual masses in the uterus. And this statistic, I feel like, is almost like we've just adopted, well, that's just how it is. You're a woman, you have a uterus, and so you're gonna get fibroids. And so we're having this talk to kind of demystify and dismantle that mindset. So 8 to 20% of women of reproductive age experience PCOS. And if you don't know what PCOS is, it's polycystic ovarian syndrome. And there's two different forms of PCOS, but they are distinctly female challenges because of our reproductive issues. So these numbers are really crazy, but it's a real thing. There's so many women who are suffering from these really debilitating conditions. And I think it's really important to have a conversation about how to truly preventively care for our unique female bodies. All right, so we're gonna break it down. So the title of this course is What is a Healthy Cycle? And so how I wanted to kind of present it to you was in a really, really basic level, because I know that when it comes to menstrual health, reproductive health, there's a lot of jargon out there. Estrogen, progesterone, dominance, all this kind of stuff. It can be really overwhelming. So I wanted to present an idea to you to just start from the most basic level and just be your best observer of your own body. Just, you don't have to change anything, just observe these 4 qualities for maybe a few cycles and see what your rhythm is, what your body is currently experiencing. Okay, so the 4 qualities that we're going to talk about are the length of the cycle, the length of the period, color and quality, and also quantity of blood that's actually shedding. All right, so let's talk about length of cycle. Is everybody okay? Everybody? Okay, so the length of cycle, 28 to 30 days is a healthy cycle. And I know some women actually cycle shorter and longer, but 28 to 30 days is a healthy cycle. And the healthy cycle is a term that it's when you are hormonally balanced, your cycle is consistent and regular. So you can have a 28 to 30 day cycle, but you could have debilitating pain. So there's different parameters that you have to look for. So some women can actually have 27-day cycles, be totally completely free of symptoms, have it like clockwork, free of symptoms, and that's their healthy cycle. So 28 to 30 days is a number to kind of gauge and to, as a parameter. So where did this 28 to 30 days come from? So from our history, there are a lot of cultures, many, many cultures that believe that women cycle with the moon. So I wanted to read you this quote from Christiane Northrup. If you guys don't know who Christiane Northrup is, you have to go follow her on Facebook, buy her book. I bought her book, Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom, when I was in my 20s, and it's like totally old and pages are kind of ripping out and stuff, but it's like my treasured book. Okay, so she says, and she's a doctor, she's a gynecologist, and so she's like in that world, but she has this total respect and incorporation of ancient thoughts and wisdom. And she says, our creative, biological, and psychological cycle parallels the phases of the moon. From ancient times, some cultures have referred to women having their menstrual periods as being on their moon. So the moon phases, I don't know if you guys know the cycle or the phases of the moon. Maybe that could be our next talk. So the phases of the moon, it changes from full moon to new moon and around again in 29.5 days. And so that's why I think in ancient cultures, women were so drawn to the moon, because it was like, it mimicked their menstrual cycles. And it said that women who are free of symptoms actually follow and flow with the moon cycle. And you can kind of gravitate towards this train of thought. If you don't, that's totally fine. But the bottom line is, and the fact is that our bodies are innately, intimately tied with nature. Nobel Prize winners in 2017, they actually won a Nobel Prize, a group of scientists, because they actually found this internal clock that humans have that is so tied with the seasons and the changes and shifts into night and day. They call it the circadian clock. But I think maybe they recognize this, I don't know, but they got a Nobel Prize for it. But ancient cultures already know this. They know that we are intimately tied with nature because we're not separate from nature. All right, so one of the ways that you can get intimate with yourself and your cycle is to start tracking it. So I want to get like a yes or no. You guys start typing. Do you guys track your cycles? Yes, no? So there's a bunch of apps out there. so many apps. Dow Labs, if you go to their website, they actually have a free download of like actual paper. If you're really into kind of writing and being creative and jotting down things, that's a really amazing tool. So why are you going to track your cycle? You're tracking your cycle because you're going to be your great observer into knowing yourself the absolute best so that you can approach your health in a very preventative and productive way. So what you start to do is you track your cycle and then you notice certain things, patterns. So those could be negative patterns or positive patterns. And so what you want to do is work with the positive patterns and then have an approach towards the negative ones. So you might have like really cyclical breast tenderness, like a week before your cycle, like your nipples are like on fire, like you can't have anybody even brush up against you kind of a thing. And so when you start to track those things and know exactly when they come on, you can approach it in a more proactive way better. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the length of the period, the actual days that you bleed. So working with women, this is like a really kind of confusing area for most women. So I have women that are confused. What is my day one? And so I just wanted to talk about spotting really quick. So spotting is not your day one. Spotting is what it's happening before your actual period starts. Day one is your actual flow date. Like it's a good flow and it's starting and it's filling up your pad or tampon or menstrual cup. That is day one. And so spotting is actually a sign of there's a little bit of an imbalance there. So the length of the period, ideally healthy periods, are 3 to 5 days. So they actually start and stop within that frame. If it lingers longer or if it starts with spotting, that's definitely a sign. It's an indication of something, and that's definitely something that you want to observe and jot down. Yeah. And if you have questions around that, just go ahead and ask. We'll keep track of it. All right. Let's talk about color, you guys. Do you look at your blood? I'm so curious if you guys do. So if you don't, you have to look at it. It's such an amazing tool. I'm not saying you have to water your plants with it or anything like that, but definitely look at the color and look at the quality. Is it thin like water? Is it thick like gel? Does it coagulate or does it flow? So on the next slide, I'll talk about different color qualities, but you want your menstrual blood to be a fresh red, like cranberry color. And if it's darker or lighter than that, then it's definitely an indication that something is out of harmony. So in Chinese medicine, they actually call your menstrual blood heavenly water. How awesome is that? Heavenly water. So they call it tiangui. So healthy heavenly water is fresh red, and your period should not start on dark, dried, brown, or black looking blood. And I get this question a lot because a lot of women are on birth control pills, and that's like the #1 thing that causes this dark brownish blood at the beginning and the end. And then other reasons is circulation issues. So something is stuck and it's dry and it's not shedding properly, and so it's coming out coagulated and thick and dry. So it should not start or stop on that blood. It should actually start and stop on fresh looking blood. And of course, at the end, it starts to taper off. Yeah. And then let's go to the next slide because we'll actually talk about colors. So I tried really hard to get the colors as exact as I could get. But a healthy flow is fresh red, cranberry. Any kind of brownish tint to it is some kind of circulation issue. If it's neon, like it's so bright, it's really bright, there's a level of heat inside the blood. And then if it tapers to like more orangey pink, that's like more deficiency and like a yellow blood. Believe it or not, some women have yellow blood coming out. That is very, very severe blood deficiency. And at the end, it's slightly maroon, so it's kind of like tapering off, like it's kind of a combination of brown and neon. It's a circulation issue with heat. So these are really good things to kind of jot down while you're tracking your cycle. So on your period, just observe it. It's a tool, it's a barometer of your health. So go ahead and just jot down, what's the color? What's the color? So on the last slide, I don't know if we talked about quality. Okay, so let's talk about clots. So clots is another thing that is really, really common. So some women have just like little tiny clots that are almost grain-like, and some women have ones that are like quarter size, and some women have huge clots that are so, so painful to pass. Your uterus actually has natural enzymes to break down clots. So if you have clots, that's an indication that some mechanism is not working correctly. Okay, so quantity. This is really kind of difficult to measure because most women use pads and tampons. And so the 2 tablespoons, 35 milliliters, the average kind of flow is really hard to measure. If you used a menstrual cup, then you would know how to measure. You would have like a pretty accurate reading. And if you guys haven't used a Diva cup, it's really like a really convenient way to measure and also really take a look at the consistency and the color of your blood and measure it. Like just go ahead and measure the actual mLs that you're getting throughout your whole cycle. And it's great on the environment. So it has a lot of great value to it. So to have like a good gauge of what 35 milliliters is, if you use tampons or menstrual pads, is that a tampon, when it's completely soaked, like completely soaked, is about 5 mLs. So throughout your whole cycle, if you've soaked about 7 throughout the whole cycle, because you know how sometimes like at the beginning it's not as heavy, and then you have your medium flow, and then at the end it kind of tapers off. So if you can imagine like 7 full saturated tampons worth, then that's about 2 tablespoons, about 35 mLs. I know that seems like kind of not that much, or like 2 tablespoons, I feel like I shed more than that. If you do feel like you shed more than that, then it is really, really important for you to actually measure. Because if it tapers more than 2 tablespoons, like close to 5 tablespoons, or maybe even over than that, then that's considered a really heavy flow. And this can come with a whole array of issues like extreme fatigue and just a lot of depletion. Yeah, so more reason to use the Diva cup so you can actually measure how much you're bleeding, how much you're shedding. And if you remember from the beginning of the talk, I talked about how our menstrual blood is so intertwined with our life force. So if you can imagine that, if you are bleeding so heavily, that is your life force being depleted from your body. So it's definitely a sign that we need to adjust some things in order to stop the heavy bleeding. So here it says, so a good gauge is if a medium flow is basically if you, during your heaviest days, you're actually changing out your tampon or pad every 3 to 4 hours. All right, so we talked about 4 qualities to kind of look out for a healthy cycle. So we talked about the length of the cycle, which is around 28 to 30 days. We talked about the length of the period, which is 3 to 5 days. The color and quality is really, really important. So if you can start looking at your actual menstrual blood and maybe even measuring it with the Diva cup, that would be really beneficial. And just to also point out, a lot of pads and tampons are very toxic. I know we don't realize that sometimes, but our vaginal lining is very porous, and so it sucks up everything like a sponge. So another reason to use something more natural. And then we also talked about quantity. So 4 qualities, the breakdown of how to actually use your menstrual cycle as a tool to check the state of your inner health and well-being, your inner landscape. All right. So I wanted to present you with some ideas and how to actually incorporate some of the things that we learned about. So my work is all about periods. I talk to women about periods all the time, menstrual cycles, reproductive wellness, because it ties so much into our health and longevity. If we take care of our menstrual cycles, we age less quickly and we live in the most vital way. So 3 easy steps that you can start to incorporate is starting to track your cycle. Like I said before, Dow Labs has really nice little printouts that you can do every month to kind of draw and doodle and jot down some of your symptoms and start tracking your cycle, or there's a bunch of apps that you can actually download on your phone. And to add 1 healthful practice and to shed 1 unhealthy habit. So 1 healthful habit that I normally talk to my patients about that goes into hormonal well-being so much is rhythms. So we're already working on a cycle, the menstrual cycle, but there's other rhythms. So there's the sleep-wake cycle, which is really important. So a simple step that you could do is to sleep and wake at the same time every single day. And that's a pretty big challenge. So just incorporate kind of 1 kind of cycle, 1 kind of rhythm that you can incorporate. Another example would be to incorporate maybe a 5 to 10 minute down regulation of your nervous system every single day. So 10 minutes, go take for yourself and just shut everything off, put some earphones on, and just be present with how your body is feeling, doing some breath work, maybe even meditating. And if you do that every single day, then that's a rhythm that you have going on for yourself. Stress is such a big kind of influencer into hormonal wellness. So 1 unhealthful habit, I think one that we are all guilty of, you can maybe shed having your laptop or your phone right before bed. So maybe you can actually turn it on airplane mode and put it in the other room to charge. That could be 1 unhealthful habit that you can incorporate. Yeah. So that's the actual end. It's a really short and sweet presentation today, and we'll get to your questions, but I'm gonna actually pass it to Tracy. She's gonna talk about the Facebook group, Own Your Cycle. It's a women's challenge. And what's great about Dow Labs is they incorporate this educational piece with ancient wisdom and really practical tools. And so this group is really to support women in having harmonious hormones, really. So I'll pass it on to you, Tracy.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kris. That was awesome. And we have some great questions that,
great.
that I want to come back to. I'll just quickly mention that, we're sponsoring this this webinar partly because we have the Own Your Cycle initiative that we launched earlier this year. And Own Your Cycle is really about taking control of your cycle and doing it in a way that's really healthy and really natural and really supportive. And, hopefully taking away some of the stigma that comes along with like talking about your period. So we have a private Facebook group, and if you're not already a part of it, please join. We'd love to have you and your questions and your resources. But it's really just a collaborative place where it's a private group. So you don't have to worry about like your boss or your grandmother seeing your questions about your period. But it's kind of one of those things where sometimes it's helpful to draw on the resources that other people have. We have super knowledgeable people like Kris who are in the group. So it's not just like all about Dao Labs or Chinese medicine. It's really just for women to have another resource to learn about their bodies. So just with the Own Your Cycle initiative, we have the Women's Kit, which is a really helpful product for women who are trying to manage some of the maybe deficiencies or some of the issues that Kris talked about in a natural way. So I feel like in the West, if you have any sort of like bad thing with your period, one of the very first things the doctor will say is like go on the birth control pill. And the birth control pill is awesome if you don't want to get pregnant. But if you're, if you maybe are trying to get pregnant, or if you just don't have a good reaction to the birth control pill, there are other resources that you can use. And I personally wish I would have known about Chinese herbs at a younger age, because I think it would have really changed the way that I had managed my cycle. But I can just speak personally to the emotional balance portion of the Women's Kit, which really is to be taken during the PMS phase, and it's emotional balance. So it kind of does just what it says it's going to do. It helps you stay just much more balanced, much more even keeled. I take it when I'm not in PMS too, just if like feel like my kids are driving me crazy, but yeah, it's a good resource. We have a whole other webinar where the doctor of acupuncture that we work with talks about why we have these two formulas, how they work together, all that good stuff. So I can link it if anyone's interested in learning more about that. But let's go back to some of the questions that we had on the Facebook Live. So Kris, I will direct these towards you. Okay, so one woman's asking, is it 2 tablespoons of blood each day, or is that for the entire cycle?
That's a good question, because remember how I pointed out like 2 tablespoons doesn't even seem like a lot. But if you actually measured it and saw the actual fluid portion, it's 2 tablespoons, 35 milliliters throughout your whole cycle.
How can that much blood make that, like, make your life that much more difficult?
I know. So I know this is probably going beyond this webinar, but heavy bleeding is in Chinese medicine is an indication of a couple different things. So it could be pure exhaustion. Like your body is so tired, it cannot hold anymore. And so during your period, your hormones drop and your pelvic vessels are open. And so your body is just so tired, it cannot close them back up. So it's just shedding and shedding and shedding. Another reason that you could be bleeding heavily is your body is so intelligent. If there's something stuck on the walls, it's going to try and get it out. And so blood acts as like a hose. So it's trying to soften and move anything that's stuck on the walls, because the lining that's stuck on the walls is old hormonal information. And so if you have something stuck on the walls, your body's going to try and intelligently get it out of the body because it doesn't belong there anymore. Yeah.
Interesting. Another woman's wondering if beetroot capsules would be good for heavy flowers.
Beetroot, well, it's good to replenish iron. So during your period, there's a specific diet that you should follow that's very high in iron and protein, not necessarily animal protein. But if you think very logically, you're bleeding. you're bleeding during your period, and so you need to replenish iron and you need to replenish blood that you've lost. So beet root powder, you can actually, incorporate it during your period days and even after your period days. Honestly, you can incorporate it even premenstrually because beetroot has an amazing function on liver function, and the liver plays such a huge role right before your period, and it helps the bile flow a lot better. So I would say, incorporate beets. Amazing stuff. Yeah.
And then another woman just commented, and I'll just share this, it's more of a comment, but she says, I bled heavily before when I first started steaming, but now that I've done more steaming, it's never felt that heavy.
Yeah. So with steaming, with the logic of steaming, it's, what does steam do? Steam cleans, right? We steam clean. And so it softens, it opens up pores, and so it allows whatever is stuck on the walls to actually shed. So some women, after they steam for like a month, they'll never see like a heavy period again. But maybe the first 2 months, they'll actually shed that old lining, and they'll see a lot of like brown old blood discharge, and then they'll stop seeing those heavy periods. Yeah.
Interesting. And then another question. A woman says, I've had a copper IUD for 9 years. Can this be influencing my cycle negatively, even though it is non-hormonal?
Yeah, so the way that Chinese medicine would view that is that it's a foreign object in the body. So if you do have heavy periods with your copper IUD, then that could be a reason why you have heavy periods, or heavy periods is your body is sending more blood to your uterus to actually flush out the IUD. Some women actually have no periods or hardly any periods on their copper IUDs, but they'll have spotting. But even the spotting is an indication that something, your body notices that there's something there, and it's still trying to kind of shut it out. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so we have a comment that on the Dow Labs website, the period calendar is not working, which I will look at when we get off the webinar. How do you, or can you lengthen your cycle to 28 or 30 days?
Yeah, you can absolutely do that. So shorter cycles are a bit tricky. If you have a long cycle, you have more of what's called a robust constitution, and so it's actually easier to shorten a long cycle. It's actually more difficult to lengthen a shorter cycle, but it's not impossible, and it can absolutely be done. So shorter cycles can happen for 2 reasons also, or probably even more. So short cycles can actually happen because there's too much heat in the body, or what we call too much yang in the body. And so the blood becomes a little bit reckless and just comes early. Another reason is for that exhaustion. It's like your cycle can't hold long enough to sustain those rises and lowering of hormones, and so it's just exhausted. So it's like, oh, I can't hold it anymore. I'm just going to start the period right now. So you have to come with it from. So that's what I like about the Dow Labs, like the women's kit, because it has 2 distinct classical herbal formulas. One of them that helps build your body. So it builds the yin, which is so important in the first 2 weeks of your menstrual cycle, so that you can actually have a successful ovulation. And then the last 2 helps to hold and sustain and circulate all that, all the hormones and the blood. So with regular use and lifestyle practices, you can absolutely lengthen your cycle.
Awesome.
It's definitely possible.
We have so many good comments. I can't even get over it. So, here's a good question. Why does our cycle change when we work with other women?
It probably has to do with the moon phases. So normally when that happens, it's like the myth is that we follow the dominant woman. But I think realistically, what's happening is when you gather with women or when you hang out with women, you're more in tune with kind of like the feminine energy and the pull to the moon. And I think that's a little bit more likely. So you're kind of syncing to the most dominant moon phase. So it could be either the dominant person is phasing with the full moon or the new moon. So then your cycle starts to kind of shift to be in line with either one of those. Yeah.
That's funny. It's cool. One woman says, I've been using emotional balance postpartum and it's been so helpful. So that's awesome. That's like
amazing.
Perfect application.
Yeah.
For it.
Yeah.
And emotional balance is the formula I was talking about that I use for PMS, and then also just like if I'm going a little bit nuts.
Yeah. I just wanted to say something really quick. So I'm not sure what demographic we attracted, but I feel like an important thing to point out is that if you're around the age of 30, 35, this is an important time in Chinese medicine. So that means that women cycle in years of 7. And so 7 times 5, when you're in your 5th cycle, you're 35. This is the time, 35, when you need to start thinking about menopause, because I know that's like completely off our radar, but at 35, your hormones drop dramatically. And this is why we're not prepped as a society of women here in modern Western culture to adapt to that natural rhythm. And so what happens is we experience so many perimenopausal symptoms that could be avoided if we had the knowledge that our hormones dramatically drop at around age 35. And so supplementing with something like women's formula, the purple packet that you guys have, it's a tonic. It's a woman's tonic, and it has so many things in there that help sustain your hormone levels to prevent those things from even occurring. I just wanted to point that out.
That's so interesting, because I did talk to another woman who'd been taking the women's formula for menopause, and she was really adamant that it was helping her prolong her period. She was like,
yeah,
if I wasn't taking this, I would have already gone through menopause, but this is helping me stay in my rhythm and stay in my cycle, which like she was all about. So
sure.
It's
That's great.
Really interesting. Let's see. We'll do maybe a couple more questions. We have so many good ones.
I can always go back later and just kind of scope through to see and then I can answer them.
Yeah, and we can probably address some of these in the group too. So once a person gets the cycle to the 28, 30 days without any imbalances, does the cycle stay that way?
Yeah, I feel like we should have another talk.
We should.
Yeah, because this is kind of a basic class where you learn about your menstrual cycle and the power of it and the amazing tool that it is. It's a vital sign. But the next kind of lens that we can kind of incorporate is how to live in harmony with the natural ebbs and flow of our menstrual cycle. Because women are dynamic. We're not meant to function in a male linear way, even though culture says that we need to be that way. It's physiological. Our flows are very up and down. And so we are very dynamic beings. We have times of introversion and extroversion and sad and happy. And those are natural flows within our physiological menstrual cycle. And so the next kind of element to teach is to actually go through the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle and learn about the best practices for each and support ourselves through each one of those so that we can live in more harmony. So a lot of times symptoms come up because we're going against those rhythms. We push too hard during our periods is like a prime example of one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's one more question. Someone's asking if Dow has any formulas to support women already at menopause. And the answer to that is that right now, yes and no. I think emotional balance, and Kris, you can probably speak to this too, but I think emotional balance is a really great formula. I think anyone can use it in any stage of their life. Like, doesn't really, anytime you just need that extra boost of just mental clarity, it's there. And then we do have, just kind of stay tuned. In June, we'll be releasing a new formula, which is really geared towards women who are in menopause. And
Great.
so there'll be more to come with that, but it's really, it helps cool the body. So it's really meant for women who are experiencing hot flashes. So if that's something that you're experiencing, there will be something to address that. And then I would also say, I think acupuncture is a really great resource for when you're going through those hormonal changes.
Yeah. So if you understand the basis of the formula, then you can apply it to yourself. So women's formula is a strong blood builder. So if you are coming from a place of deficient hormones and blood deficiency, and that's the cause of your menopausal symptoms, then that's going to be your best friend. But if you're coming from a place of a circulation issue and you're needing more harmony with, I think of emotional balance as like this adaptogenic harmonizing formula. And so it has this ability to course what we call liver chi and circulation, and just kind of, the classical name is free and easy wanderer. I mean, come on, who doesn't need that in their life? It's a classical formula, and on top of that, it's a harmonizing formula. And harmonizing meaning that it's harmonizing all of the systems in the body. So if you're needing something a little bit more in that realm, or if you need both, then you would do the combination. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, let's end it here. I will go through the questions, and anything we didn't get to, I'll post them in the group, and then we'll just rely on Kris to help answer.
Yeah.
Hopefully
I'll actually end it now and then go to the group and see if I can answer any questions.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Did you want to talk about the Own Your Cycle, the call to action at all?
Yeah. So please do join the Facebook group. And then if you're interested in trying the two formulas that Kris and I have really been talking about, the women's formula and the emotional balance, those are packaged together in what we call our women's kit. And if you buy a 2-month trial by the end of, what did we say, Kris? I think Friday.
Yeah.
So by the end of the week, you can use Kris's code Dr.Kristen at checkout for 20% off of the total cost. And then we also do a 60-day money back guarantee on that product. So if it doesn't help whatever you're trying to address, just let us know and we'll give you a full refund. And then if you do buy the 2-month trial, you're automatically entered to win a free month of acupuncture treatments, which we're drawing every month. So definitely some good reasons to try it if you're interested. We'd love to have you as a part of our crew. So, and let us know, like, if it does work for you, if it doesn't work for you. We'd love to hear all about it. So thank you.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much, Kris. Thank you for sharing your expertise. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for being involved and asking really amazing questions. And I'm going to go through all the comments and questions and I'll address them. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Okay. Bye.